wanted to mention another operation that we were on. Each night that our battalion would stop, I'd sort of encourage the battalion commander to put out ambush patrols. So if anybody tried to get into our area, we would get to them before. So on this one occasion, the recon platoon, which about a dozen guys, were going out to set up an ambush. And I went with them, along with the lieutenant I was with. There was about a dozen of them. We traveled for about a mile, I guess, away from the main body of the battalion. We were set up on the riverbank, watching for anything that might come and go on the river. And as we were just getting in there, it was too dark. We were a little late getting in there. But I saw a fellow smoking, taking a draw on a cigarette, and you could see it light up real bright. And then it would go down. And I watched again. I saw it happen. I immediately got the patrol leader, and I had it pointed out to him what was happening. I could see somebody way up the river. Those cigarettes could show for a long way. And he watched it, and it went down and went back up bright again. And he got very excited. And he got everybody, they got a little too noisy trying to get into position on the bank of the canal waiting for this group to come along. Well, they came. It was dark, very dark, and we opened fire on them. It was hard to tell what had happened. How many we got, we couldn't tell anything. We got no return fire. Shortly after we stopped firing, about half of the unit jumped in sampans and went across the canal to the other side. They were looking for what had happened to the rest of them. I was late. I jumped in one behind them and then tried to figure which way they had gone when they got to the other side of the river. And the river was probably 50 feet wide, 75 feet wide, something like that. And I figured they'd gone downstream. So I headed downstream along a little path you could just barely see. And I stopped and listened, didn't hear anything, went a little further. And then I got leery. I said, well, I'm going to come up upon them. I'm going to scare them, and then I'm going to get shot. I better go back to the main group because they're expecting people to return. So I went back and then waited for the other guys to come in. I never did get a real clear picture of what damage was done, but I do know that they were pretty well decimated as a result of the ambush. The battalion commander and the company of the battalion, I guess, came forward to assist us, and we spent the night at that point and then moved out the next day. Another operation I was going to mention, because it's fairly famous, my battalion commander and I got orders to go to Saigon to receive an order on an operation. We went to Saigon. We were transported to a building. We met in a fairly large room with a lot of people, and we were told that there was a Viet Cong battalion that was coming, or North Vietnamese maybe, was coming inside from Cambodia, inside to our area, operating in an area right up on the Mekong River, maybe a mile away, but they were coming in and operating in that area. There were 3 battalions in the operation, 2 airborne battalions, not to jump in, but to travel on the ground. They were to go inside Vietnam, right on the border, and be a block. And then my battalion was attached 3 tanks. And then we were to move and attack toward where this unit was. And as it tried to get back into Cambodia, it would be decimated. Well, this was supposed to be a big operation that was going to get a lot of notice. Right after we finished the order, they called the 2 battalion commanders of the airborne and the battalion command, my battalion, and the advisors to go in, about 6 or 7 guys. And we got an order a little differently. It said, we're not going to stay in Vietnam. The airborne units will move into Cambodia and block on that side to be sure that we have plenty of room to get behind them. We all were on separate small boats, not small, pretty good size because mine had tanks on them. And we went up the Mekong almost to the Cambodian border. And we got out on the right side, which is the east side of the Mekong, and my battalion waited there. And we didn't know, but the airborne unit had moved on. We were sleeping at night, and I all of a sudden heard a lot of frantic talk on the radio. I was sleeping near the tank, and I could hear that, and I knew something had gone wrong. I didn't know exactly what had happened at first. We were told to move forward to where the attack had taken place. We did so, and we got some fire, but it was not directed at us when we got there. By the time my battalion with the tanks got there, the situation was pretty much over. It was a bad situation. The airborne units, our 2 airborne units, somehow had stayed inside of Vietnam rather than to go into Cambodia. It was dark, and they had stopped in a fairly open field. They didn't have proper security. The Viet Cong unit that we were to attack was in the tree line on the Cambodian side of them. And as soon as the sun came up, they opened fire. He killed 19, including a fellow by the name of Tom McCarthy, a very well thought of West Point graduate. If you look in Schwarzkopf's book, he writes about Tom McCarthy being killed, and that really alerted him to the fact that there was a war going on in Vietnam, and he needed to get there. At that time, Schwarzkopf was getting a master's degree in Southern California. At any rate, we had a total of 19 killed, and we departed the area shortly thereafter. And I remember passing one American guy that I had known before, and he said, "Boy, we got our asses kicked." And I nodded, and my battalion went on. I remember one other situation happening when I was in the Pentagon later in my Army career. A fellow by the name of Mike McCarthy was in the same DESOPS, Deputy Chief of Staff Operations unit that I was in. And I learned he was a brother of Tom McCarthy. And one day I just sort of mentioned to him casually, "I was on the operation where your brother got killed. If you're interested, I can talk to you about some of the details of what I know." And he said, "I'm not interested." So it sort of alerted me to the fact that some people do not want to have a lot of information, and that comes to mind because I'll say something about this later. We had a number of operations in addition to this, but I think I'll stop at that, and I want to talk about one large operation in the next recording, which is called the bloodiest 60 minutes of the war in Vietnam.